Welcome back to the Footy Frontline podcast. My name is D'Urbano and I'm joined here today by Oliver Caffrey to dissect a massive round one that's now in the books. Ollie, we've had 9 games of action. We've seen some of the teams twice already. Plenty to dissect from the first full weekend of footy of 2024.
Yeah, another huge round, and the Grand Finalists slipping up is going to be a big storyline to come in the next few weeks to see how they respond. So, yeah, we did not see that coming, that the Lions in Collingwood were be that shaky this early in the season. So, yeah, it's a bit happening.
Well, it's the first time in footy history, I think, that the 2 grand finalists have started 0-2, and that's probably the best place to start. Collingwood falling to a big defeat against Sydney, and the Lions losing away to Fremantle. We'll start with Collingwood. Friday night footy, it was billed as a chance for them, a bit of a get-right game as well after losing an opening round against the Giants. They unfurled the flag. It was a big occasion playing in front of their home support, but God, there was such a poor performance from the Pies, who were just overrun by a much better Sydney team on Friday night.
Yeah, if there's any evidence footy is 90% above the shoulders, that is it. Collingwood just weren't switched on at all. Their pressure wasn't there. That's what it's built on. That's what the game's been built on the last few years, just pressure, intensity, getting to the ball first, and they just weren't. They were just overpowered by Sydney right from the start. It could have been a lot worse at quarter time. The Swans missed a lot of shots in that first quarter and kept Collingwood in the game. But, yeah, after that, once the Swans started kicking straight, it was all over. And yeah, I know I said last week that that'd be fine, but yeah, definitely some concerns there now for Craig McRae and the coaching staff that they weren't able to lift. And yeah, when their intensity isn't there, it just exposes them across the ground. You look at the midfield, like you got Dacos and DeGoey, the absolute superstars, but yeah, they're relying on too few at the moment. And then the defence looked just completely ordinary at times. Darcy Moore looked really out of sorts. And then, yeah, the forward line's a massive issue, I think. No Dan McStay there to clunk those big contested marks. And, yeah, Brody Myercheck not quite himself at the moment. Lucky Schultz looked okay at times, quite early, but then did come into the game. But, yeah, some concerns across the park for the Pies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, interestingly enough, Collingwood actually won the centre clearances and won the clearances on the day, but it was just everything else around that. They were completely outgunned. It seemed like for every one Collingwood shirt, there was always 2 Sydney jumpers. They were spreading so quickly. They almost looked, I don't want to say fitter, but it felt like they had an extra pep in their step than Collingwood. Collingwood just felt lethargic, uncharacteristic turnovers. You mentioned Darcy Moore. There was one in particular in the third quarter where went right back into the corridor and basically kicked it straight into his opponent, and then Justin McInerney goes back the other way and kicks an easy goal. But plenty of those ones just out the back, and it seems that teams have found potentially a little bit of a blueprint to get through the press and get players forward, because Collingwood do like to play with a lot of numbers up the field. But don't tell Craig McRae that it is, sort of that things aren't going in the right direction, because he was quite bullish after the game that things can turn quickly, and we know that they can. They do play Thursday night against the Saints, which, of course, the first opportunity for them, they get a 6-day turnaround going into that game to hopefully steady things just a little bit, because the last thing they need is to go 0-3 going into a game at the Gabba against a team who are also struggling after 2 weeks of football. The Brisbane Lions started strongly. It looked like it was heading in a good direction, but then just from out of nowhere, Fremantle really turned the game on its head. Ollie, what did you notice? What changed? What were Fremantle able to do to overrun Brisbane last night?
It was pretty similar to how Collingwood played, just a lack of intensity across the park. Fremantle just outworked them. They're just more hungry. They spread better. Yeah, the absence of Kadeen Coleman, it's just going to be huge. Like, since he went down at halftime in the game against the Blues, they just have looked really ordinary. I know they started pretty well, but got 2 goals from some pretty, well, not dicey umpiring, but yeah, they were lucky to get those goals right in the square. They were gimmies in the end. So, yeah, that was probably one of the poorest performances under Chris Fagan, for sure. They usually bounce back after a bad loss, but they didn't at all. It was sort of back to the bad old days in the mid-2010s there for a while. They 8 goals in a row against them. They could do nothing to stem the tide that Freo brought. Their midfielders just outworked them. The Dockers midfielders, they look really strong, and yeah, a lot of talent there. It was sort of interesting to see how the Dockers would go this season. Played finals 2022, disappointing last year, had some great wins. So I think it was always going to be a danger game for the Lions going over there, travelling west. But you thought after a bad loss first up that, yeah, they'd bounce back, and they just didn't. So, yeah, again, like Collingwood, major concerns now, 0-2, and they've got more than a week to stew on it now before meeting Collingwood. They've got the bye this weekend, so that's a lot of thinking time to. It might be a good thing just to settle down a bit and just see where things have gone wrong. But yeah, that wasn't too concerned out of the Carlton game, even though it was a bad loss to give after being 46 points up. But yeah, just the lack of response, very disappointing.
And also, of course, no Lachie Neale last Sunday as well, which was obviously a big out in the middle. But it did feel like in the third quarter, especially when Fremantle started having all those injuries pile up, you just thought, okay, maybe Brisbane with a few more legs, they might be able to outrun Fremantle. But Fremantle just kept having an answer. And there was those couple of chances in the last quarter, Kai Lohmann missing from directly in front, which you kick that, maybe, there's a bit of a late sort of fight back, but then Fremantle go right back the other way. And Michael Frederick wrapped it up with a beautiful goal. So a lot to mull over for the Lions heading into round 3. Of course, the bye this week in round 2. The two teams that have impressed everyone in the first 2 rounds of the season have been the two sides residing in New South Wales and GWS and Sydney. The Giants recorded a big win against North Melbourne, expected, but they could have easily won that game by a lot more. Missed a lot of shots. Jesse Hogan's sensational. He's probably playing the best footy of his career, which is great to see after all the difficulties he had after leaving Melbourne back in 2018.
Oh, he definitely is. He kicked, I think, more than 10 goals at one stage. Game in the back half of last season, I think, against Essendon. He had a really big night there and has just continued on this season. He looks really powerful up forward. And, yeah, I just can't spot any weaknesses across the ground. They are just so stacked. Defence, they're so solid. Sam Taylor is just a rock down there. And then the midfield, so powerful. Kieran Briggs is coming along a long way as a ruckman. He's a real powerhouse in the middle for them now. And Tom Green just racks up his own footy for fun every week. And he's definitely one of the Brownlow medal contenders. And, yeah, as you mentioned, Jesse Hogan up forward. And those 2 wins have come without Toby Green really having much of an impact at all. So that's real worry for the rest of the competition that Toby's been quiet and they've still been able to win those games comfortably. So, yeah, they deservedly are premiership favourites very early on. It's only after round 1 they've only played the 2 games. But, yeah, they look the strongest across the board. There's depth there in the reserves as well. A guy like Nick Haynes, he's an All-Australian. He's the sub. So they are looking very good. And I think, yeah, you'd want to see them in the grand final of that sort of team unless there's a big run with injuries they have. But, yeah, they are looking very, very powerful, ominous.
An embarrassment of riches of talent that they got up there in Sydney. It feels like, remember all those years ago when they had almost too many of those top draft picks they had to obviously trade off to other teams. Start to feel a little bit like that again with players that aren't able to get into the best 23 at the moment. Sydney, on the other hand, we touched on them off the top, but we spoke probably more about Collingwood's weaknesses more than what Sydney's strengths actually were. They were brilliant, especially in the forward half. So many different players hitting the scoreboard, and those young guns that we saw emerge a lot in 2022 maybe took a bit of a slow year last year, but have really re-emerged this year. You guys like Chad Warner, James Rowbottom and co, they were sensational on Friday night at the MCG.
Yeah, their midfield's come a long way. Last year, there are times they just got absolutely smashed in the middle. I know you mentioned before they lost the clearances the other night, but they've got a lot of depth there now. They're still missing Callum Mills, Luke Parker, and Taylor Adams. They can come back into that midfield. And Isaac Heaney's just taken his chance in that midfield first 2 games of the season. It's always a hard one because he's powerful up forward, he's really good in the middle, and he's sort of been just relegated to a forward role while the other guys do the job in the middle. But yeah, it'd be hard to take him out with the sort of footy he's playing now and put him back to that forward role where sometimes he can be shaky in a set shot in front of goal. But yeah, their forward line's coming along really well. Logan McDonald got some nice goals out the back the other night and had a really good game. That'd be a massive confidence booster for him coming into his 4th season. No buddy there now. That's just a huge game for him. Bright Friday night lights to stamp his mark. So yeah, they look very dangerous up forward, and yeah, the defence held up superbly.
And also Joel Amadi and co, they've got a really nice sort of forward mix at the moment, the Swans, and not even mentioning Tom Papley. They've got so many weapons that can hurt you all across the ground. From the other games this week, were there any sort of standouts for you, any surprises, anything that really caught your eye from some of the other games this week?
Well, Melbourne, they're still going to be up there. They've had all their challenges in the off-season. They've lost final straight sets 2 years in a row. So everyone was like, how are they going to respond to everything that's going on off the field? But yeah, Clayton Oliver, he's just come back in and starred immediately. I know people last week were just like, oh, he wasn't that great, but he still had 30 possessions in that first game against Sydney. He didn't have the sort of impact that he'd like to, but he definitely did on the weekend against the Bulldogs. And, yeah, absolutely thumped the Dogs, who they'd be really disappointed at that start. They're not traditionally great starters to a season. They've come out of the block slow and been forced to play catch-up a bit. But, yeah, I think the D's, they're still going to be a force and a premiership contender. Like, they're able to put the score on the board yesterday. That's been a problem at times, but they had a nice spread of goal kickers. Jacob Van Rooyen, he looks like he's going to be a very nice player up forward as a tall forward. So, yeah, the D's looking pretty nice.
Yeah, very good win for them on Sunday afternoon. For me, it was actually one of the losers that I think came out as one of the winners this week, and that was Richmond. I think they showed a lot on Thursday night with all the injuries that they got in that game, with Josh Gibcus going down early, Dion Prestia, Tyler Young, and the way they managed to stay in the game. Now, start of that last quarter when they were leading, it did feel for a moment that Carlton were just going to run over them and win quite big in the end. But some of the performances from Nick Vlossen in particular, the rundown tackle on Charlie Curnow comes to mind. One of the great, I think, individual plays of recent time when you think about
Shore-esque.
Yes, same end of the ground as well. So, it definitely taking a bit of inspiration from him. But I think after the loss they had against Gold Coast, where they were quite disappointing, they started disappointing in that game, finished strongly, and they took that momentum back to the G. They got some key players back. And I think in what's probably not going to be the years of sort of the last 6 or 7 years for Richmond where they've been there, they've won premierships, they've played in finals, I think that there was a lot of green shoots for them, a lot of positivity to take out of that game going into next week. I know they've got some really tough games coming up at the MCG, but I think that they'd feel quite confident coming out of that they can match it with some of the best teams when they're at full pelt. But when you're losing key defenders, like in the manner that they are at the moment, I think that's going to be a bit of a concern for the Tigers going forward.
Yeah, covering that game on Thursday night, going to the press conferences after the game, you would swear that Richmond had won the game, just with how happy Adam Uze was with that performance. He said he was proud and had a big smile on his face. And then Michael Voss walks in as the winning coach. And, yeah, he wasn't happy at all. Yeah, take the win, but, yeah, a lot to work on for the Blues, and they could have easily lost that game. So, nice one to get on the board. It's 4 points, you move on for the Blues. But, yeah, they got out of jail there. Richmond, superb performance under duress, under the circumstances. So, they'll take a lot out of that, especially after responding from, a pretty diabolical performance, really, up on the Gold Coast. It should have been a lot worse. They did respond, but, yeah, nice to come out against Carlton, that big game, and stand up. But it does help when you have Tom Lynch, Dusty back, Nan Kurbis, he was big in the middle. So, yeah, those three made a huge difference.
Of course. And let's have a look ahead to this week. As we mentioned, Carlton and Brisbane will have the bye this week. So only 8 games of footy this weekend. And it all kicks off on Thursday night at the MCG. St Kilda hosting Collingwood. It's the special Spuds game on Thursday night as well. So it'll be a great sort of spectacle down there at the G. Looking forward to being there. St Kilda, they were gallant. They pushed Geelong right into the last minute. Felt like for a second they were going to do it. They were going to do what they hadn't done in so long and get a win down the highway. They take on a desperate Collingwood at the MCG. The Saints haven't won many games at the MCG throughout history. They don't play a lot at the MCG. They don't play many home games at the MCG for that as well. But a big game for these two sides on Thursday night.
It's almost must win for Collingwood already. I know it sounds silly, but to be 0-3 and then have it going up to the Gabba, that would be a really poor start for the Pies in a premiership defence. And we saw what happened with Geelong last year. They went 0-3 after winning the premiership. They went all right, but still missed the finals and could never really get going. So, yeah, this is going to be a cracking game. Like St Kilda, they have a few injuries and they're probably not expected to be right up there in the top 4. But, yeah, the way Ross Lyon coaches them, they're always going to be in games and always going to have a fight. So, their record is very poor in Spud's game, 0-3 the last 3 years. So that probably pushes my tip towards Collingwood responding. But, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the Saints got up because there was enough signs there on – it's just so hard to win down in Geelong. It doesn't matter when you're playing them, what team they have out in the park. They're always going to have that home ground advantage there. And, yeah, obviously the Saints hadn't won there for 25 years and couldn't quite get there. But, yeah, I think Collingwood should respond, but it will be a really tight game. It could be 1 or 2 points.
Yeah, I think Collingwood do bounce back. I can't see it being 3 bad games in a row from Collingwood. I feel like the pressure, if it wasn't on them already going into that Sydney game, it's just gone to a whole nother level. It'll be interesting to see the changes. It'll be interesting to see what the forward mix is this week, the defensive mix as well, whether they go a little bit taller, bring someone in like Billy Frampton to play probably in defence, or maybe throw a Reef McInnes forward because Ash Johnson's had 2 really disappointing weeks. So I think it'll be fascinating to see the team selection this week. Does Tom Mitchell get back into the team? We'll wait and see. But I think Collingwood at the MCG. If this was at Marvel Stadium, I'd be feeling a lot more nervous from a Pies perspective. But I do think that at the MCG, with all the cards stacked against them, you'd think Craig McRae will get them up for this game. And I think that sense of a hangover, the talk about attitude and everything, you just can't see it dragging on for another week. It would be talking about Brisbane, that sense. It's just you haven't seen that from these teams in so long. So it's almost unheard of. But a loss here and they're firmly behind the 8 ball in that premiership defence. Friday night, Adelaide, Geelong and Adelaide Oval. This is going to be an absolute cracker. The Cats coming off that win against St Kilda. Adelaide, similar to St Kilda, they almost pinched it right at the end there. They looked dead and buried at the start of the last quarter, but they almost found a way to get something out of that game against the Suns. A disappointing 3 quarters from the Crows, but a really strong end. And if they can get some bodies back as well, hopefully for their sake, they'll be able to put up a little bit more of a fight against the Cats this week.
Yeah, fingers crossed for them. Taylor Walker is back this week. He was playing the other night. They probably win that one. But yeah, really disappointing start. They only had 1 goal at half time. So tough conditions, but they really came home with a wet sail and could have easily pinched that. They had the ball in there for the last few minutes and could have got another goal there. The Suns just hung on. But yeah, like we thought, the Cats, they just regenerate and bring through these young players like Ollie Dempsey the other night up forward. He was tremendous and looks like the Cats have found another one there. And Dangerfield still at his best. So this is going to be another cracking game. This could be under a goal again. But I think the Crows at home, they showed enough signs in that last quarter that they can take forward into this game. And we saw last year how good they are at home, winning most of their games there. So I think the Crows should get on the board and square the ledger.
Yeah, I agree. I think Adelaide bounced back. It's going to be a fascinating game because, as you said, Geelong were pretty good. They just couldn't put away St Kilda. They had so many chances in front of goal at key points in the game, but were very inaccurate. But I do think if Taylor Walker plays, it just shifts that dynamic a lot more in Adelaide's favour. And if you've got 50,000 fans in there at Adelaide Oval, it's going to be quite a buoyant atmosphere. And we know at Adelaide Oval, it's one of the great atmospheres in footy. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that one plays out. And I think the Crows will come away with the win. Saturday afternoon at Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne take on Fremantle. Now, this is interesting because I think as much as North Melbourne were beaten quite handsomely by GWS, there were some signs I think Alistair Clarkson can certainly take out of, and the North Melbourne players could take out of going into this game. Fremantle on the road, we know they've had their struggles in the past. They've been a bit 50-50 at times. They do have that win in the bank against Brisbane. Any chance for North Melbourne here? Because, to be honest, I think they should feel quite confident they might be able to get something from this game.
Oh, they would have taken a lot of confidence out of that match on the weekend. Yes, they went down by 39 points. We're never in the game. GWS blew them out early. And we're always going to win that at home. But, yeah, they look a lot better already this season. I know they started pretty strongly last season under Clarkson. They won the first 2 games and actually did beat Freo over at Optus to start the Dockers horror season.
Bit of a controversial.
Very controversial circumstances, that one. But, yeah, under the lid at Marvel Stadium, I think the Kangaroos should fancy themselves a big chance. But it's just going to be how that young midfield stacks up against Freos, who look like they're coming on very nicely now. You got Sarong and Brayshaw on that nice 23, sort of 24 age category now, and they look like they're going to be absolute superstars of the competition. So, yeah, Freo are really hard to read. They had some great wins on the road last year, but also some really poor performances too. They're so unpredictable. But I think the Dockers might just get up, but Kangaroos, they won't disgrace themselves. They're going to be so much better this year and might come down to 2 or 3 goals.
Tipping a thriller here at Marvel. I reckon it's going to be a really exciting game. I mean, we saw sometimes early in the year as well, North Melbourne were actually, quite competitive. They had some really, gallant performances, especially at Marvel Stadium. And I think that, as you said, the signs of, green shoots that came out of that game against GWS Now playing back at home, you'd think that they would look at this game as, all right, this is a real opportunity for us to make a bit of a statement. But I think Fremantle might just be a little bit too strong when it comes down to those key moments. Just having that little bit of extra class, that little bit of extra experience, they might just edge the Kangas at Marvel Stadium. Just up the road at the MCG, Hawthorn versus Melbourne. The D's, as we spoke about, big win against the Western Bulldogs. Hawthorn, they were right in it against Essendon. They basically kicked themselves out of the game against the Bombers, ended up losing by 4 goals, but they were right in it, right until that last bit. But bad kicking is bad football, and they missed plenty of chances early in the game to potentially, create a bit of a gap on the Bombers earlier in the contest.
Yeah, they did. They always prove me wrong, the Hawks. I think they've just got too many injuries, too many guys out, and then they put together a really good performance as they did on the weekend. And yeah, could have easily won that game with the kick straighter. And then it was some of the culprits that you wouldn't expect. It was Luke Bruce. He's an absolute deadeye. He missed a lot of shots, but Jack Given really good in his first game for Hawthorn. Some nice signs there, but their midfield, it was a bit of a worry against Essendon. Essendon's midfield's not favoured across the competition. There's probably better midfields than them, and Hawthorn, their games against Brisbane, Collingwood, when they won last year, that was their midfield. That was winning it for them. So against Melbourne, it's going to be a huge challenge. Clayton Oliver, Christian Pritchard, and Max Gawn doesn't really get much bigger than that. So I think Hawthorn will be competitive again. But yeah, at the MCG, D's should be too strong.
I think the loss of James Sicily for suspension as well is a massive one for Hawthorn when you think about going up against this Melbourne forward line. Obviously, this Melbourne attack isn't as potent as some of the best attacks in the league, but it's still such a huge loss because he just sets everything up from a defensive standpoint. He plays that sweeper sort of loose man role better than probably anyone in the competition. So I think that Melbourne will be too strong in this game, but I think Hawthorn will give them a red-hot crack. If they can kick straight, though, this time around, I think that will go a long way. I know it sounds quite simple, it's quite a cliche, but when you look at the chances they missed against Essendon, they potentially snatch that game if, they just convert 4 or 5 of those great opportunities they had. So it'll be fascinating to see how that one plays out on Saturday. The final game on Saturday night, Sydney up against the Bombers at the SCG. Sydney riding high after 2 straight wins. Essendon getting that first win on the board. 2 old rivals. A big game here. We've seen some thrillers between these 2 teams throughout history. Are we going to see another one here to start 2024?
I reckon we will. It's just uncanny. It doesn't matter where these sides are on the ladder. I don't know what it is about these teams, but it's always a close game. It's just unbelievable. So the way Essendon played, there was a lot of promising signs there. Archie Perkins, really good in the midfield. They should just keep him in there now. He's one of those young players coming through, and I think his best footy is in the midfield. So just keep him there. Doesn't matter if some of the older guys get pushed out. Just stick with him. But the Swans at the SCG, they did start the season really well last year as well, and then sort of had a bit of a lean run after about 2 or 3 games. So it'd be interesting to see if they're able to keep up the early season form this time. But you'd think the Swans would be too strong, but yeah, you never count either team out of this one. Just a weird sort of rivalry. I don't know where it comes from, but it's always close. And I'm tipping the Swans by about 3 points.
Players climbing goalposts, goals after the siren. I mean, what's new between these 2 teams? There's always something going on, especially when it's at the SCG. It's like a bit of weird juju up there, It just weird things happen. I think the Swans win this game as well. I think they've got the good form. They're going to carry that through. The Bombers will put up a fight, but as well, losing Zach Reid to a knee injury as well. Horrific news to lose someone, who was finally going to get his opportunity in that defence and try and build around him as someone for the future. Ben Mackay, I thought, was actually pretty good as well against Hawthorn. So I think, having him going up against Logan McDonald will be a really good matchup after the form McDonald's been in. But I think Sydney are going to be too strong on Saturday night. We head over to Ballarat on Sunday. The Doggies up against the Suns. Gold Coast 2-0 up against the Bulldogs, who need to respond. After a disappointing loss against Melbourne, you'd think they've had a bit of tough times when they've gone to Ballarat last year in particular. Think about that loss against the Giants. This is going to be an interesting one because they'd fancy themselves out there in the country, but Gold Coast coming in with all that momentum at the moment off the back of 2 straight wins.
So much momentum for the Suns, and they would have seen this game at the start of the season. It was always going to be a tricky one, being in Ballarat. They've never beaten the Dogs there before, so the Bulldogs come in with actually a lot of pressure. It's only 1 game, but you just factor in all the off-season stuff that happened at the Whitten Oval, the review, Beveridge under pressure at the end of last season, didn't play a final. So if they went 0-2 again, it would just, and to lose against the Suns as well, at a place they play reasonably well, it would just carry huge pressure after everything that had happened. So they just simply have to win this one. And yeah, some of the decisions Beveridge has made, he's a bit divisive with fans, even though he is only the second premiership coach in their history. But yeah, Riley Sanders pumped him up during the week, said he was the best young kid that he's seen walked in the Whitten Oval. And yeah, he was subbed off in that game despite playing pretty well. He did make a poor mistake, so that might have had something to do with it, led to a goal. But yeah, and Caleb Daniel, he's been a great player for about a decade, and he started as a sub, and some guys that have come in from other clubs, they were playing instead of him. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the makeup of the team is like. But yeah, I reckon the Suns can maybe pull this off and just keep that momentum going. They've had the 2 games at home, but yeah, it might be time for them just to make a statement sort of win, get one on the road, and go 3-0 for, yeah, it wouldn't have happened too often in their 14 years. So
I think the Bulldogs bounce back this week. I think they win this one in Ballarat. I think with all the pressure that's on them, it's the opportunity for a get-right game. They're expected to win because especially where it's at, where the game is being played, I think they're going to have too much individual quality. I think Gold Coast, they showed in that last quarter that they've still got a bit of work to do. Like they've been, there's been some players that have really stood out in this early part, but just the way that I don't think Damien Hardwick would be happy at all with the way they finished that game against Adelaide. To see how they've learned from that, I think that'll be a big learning curve playing those close games and seeing how they manage it. Yes, they were able to come away with the win, but you want to put your foot on the throat and don't relent. And this Bulldogs team has so much individual quality, when they get going, and they have arguably as much individual, if not more individual quality than anyone else in the competition. So I think they'll come away with a win up there in Ballarat. Sunday afternoon at the G, Richmond and Port Adelaide. Now, the Power, big winners against West Coast, expected. Similarly to GWS, probably could have won by a lot more had they kicked straight. Richmond's plenty of momentum garnered from an honourable loss against Carlton. Fascinating to see how they move the magnets around this week with all the injuries, but do you give Richmond a chance to get their first win of the season?
Yeah, I'll give them a big chance at the MCG, for sure. They pushed Port Adelaide pretty close last season, but yeah, those injuries are really going to hurt. Noah Bolter, he was terrific up forward with Tom Lynch, but then he was forced to go back when Josh Gibbs just went down. So yeah, like you said, it'd be interesting to see what they do with their positions, whether Bolter stays forward or they do just bite the bullet and go, well, Gibbs is down, we'll leave him back. So yeah, Port Adelaide, they did what they had to do. There wasn't anything flashy about it. It could have been a lot worse. They kicked pretty poorly in front of goal. So, yeah, the margin could have been a lot more than what it was. But, yeah, I think at the MCG, I reckon Richmond can get on the board and, cause a bit of a ball over.
I agree. I think Richmond are going to win this game. I think they showed a lot of promise. I think Port Adelaide, look, it's hard to really take too much out of when you're beating West Coast, in all due respect to both teams in that sense. But, when you're playing arguably the worst team in the competition at home, I think you can take a little bit out of it. You can take some small sorts of analysis out of that game, whatever. But this is going to be their first real strong test on the road. They've had some struggles with the G in the past. I mean, yes, they got that win against the Bombers last year, which they kind of just grabbed at the last second. But you look at some of their other performances of the G throughout history, they haven't been the best travellers. So we'll see how they go up here against Richmond. But I think the Tigers are going to be too strong. The final game of the round at Optus Stadium, the Eagles back at home against the Giants. Now, if this game was in Parramatta, I'd be very worried for West Coast. But the fact it's at home, Harley Reid's home debut, I'm sure the West Australian have a lot planned. Did you see the back page yesterday in the Sunday Times?
Oh, sure did. Unheard of. To get a sponsor taking a full back page ad out in support of Harley Reid, it was absolutely unbelievable. Crazy things happening over in the West. But, yeah, like you said, first game in front of the home fans, they are going to be up and about at the Western Australian and in Perth.
Well, this is a big game for GWS in the sense of trying to build on that momentum. It always feels like when you play a team that's down the lower part of the ladder, like there's a little bit more pressure because you don't really want to lose that game. I mean, West Coast have got nothing to lose all season. They're coming into every game. It's a clean slate. It's a free hit for them as well. Do you give them any hope? I give them the hope from the sense of that 2% of hope because it's at Optus Stadium, and you do get a sense that a lot of the fans will come out to see Harley Reid. Do you give them any chance, or do you think GWS come away with quite an easy win?
The smallest chance. Go back to last season. I know GWS they weren't the side they are now back then, but the Eagles got them. It was an unbelievable result. No one saw it come even then, and it looks even crazier now that the Eagles were able to win that one convincingly. But yeah, the Giants are a well-drilled team now under Kingsley. They're humming. But at home, stranger things happen. Like the Eagles could get up and about for Harley Reid's first game at home. The Giants, we're just thinking they're going to cruise over there and get the job done. They've had that first one against Collingwood. They really steeled themselves to that one. It was such a big game. Then North Melbourne. So, yeah, North Melbourne into West Coast. It isn't the easiest run for the Giants early on. So the Giants should win by 5 or 6 goals at least. But, yeah, we'll see what the Eagles can throw out there.
Predict an honourable loss for West Coast. I think that's where we're going with this.
Yeah.
I think the Eagles will give them a red-hot crack for about 3 quarters, but then the last quarter you'll just see GWS kick away. I think the neutral, to an extent, will be wanting to see West Coast push them all the way and give them a red-hot crack. But I think GWS, when the cards are on the table, they're going to be too strong and they're going to come away with a win at Optus Stadium.
Yeah, it's more the Eagles' young players that stood up on Sunday.
Yeah.
Some of the older guys, they're actually a bit of a worry. They should be the ones leading the way, pushing forward and showing what the young guys should be doing. But yeah, a guy like Andrew Gaff, he just hasn't been the same since that Brayshaw hit in 2018, missed the premiership. Just hasn't been the same player. He was an All-Australian at some point, but was subbed out of that game, and I think only 4 possessions, so he's a bit of a worry. So yeah, they need some of those more experienced players just showing the way for the Harley Reids of the world.
We'll see how this week plays out. It's going to be a big weekend of action, 8 games from Thursday through to Sunday. Ollie, time for us to say goodbye. We'll be back again next week for another big review of round 2 and look ahead as well to round 3 as we come in towards Easter. But Ollie, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Nick.